myself again. But it's the only way you're ever gonna learn. You look back and it's all in the past. I'm dwelling on that.
Good evening and welcome to NUFC Matters with me, Steve Wraith. Good to see everybody, and hope you've had a good weekend. Welcome to Chris, Pete and Holly. It is the 5-minute rant. It's your opportunity to get yourself on and have a chat about Newcastle. You might want to rant, or as Pete often puts on his thing, you might want to have a rave. But after the result we've had at the weekend, probably be a little bit of down Newcastle fans over the weekend, I think, and especially as well seeing Jose Perez lift the FA Cup with Leicester. I think it's just a case of what might have been if Ashley showed a little bit of ambition at Newcastle United and put some money into the club over the last 14 years. But congratulations to Jose. Always give a good shift at Newcastle. I know a lot of fans, some fans didn't particularly like him, but I was pleased to see him win, pleased to see Leicester win. And I suppose you've got a sleepless night down there. People with probably horns blasting and people driving round over the moon about what was going on. What was it like down in Leicester?
Oh, it was crazy. Honestly, from the if you weren't watching the game, you would have known there was a Leicester goal because the screams from around the houses around my area when Tielemans scored that goal and the screams at the final whistle were just unbelievable. There were, and I've seen the pictures on the local news and stuff of people out partying and celebrating. It's just unreal, really, really unreal, and well deserved to a well-run football club with fantastic players. And you know what? I said it to one of my mates who's a season ticket holder at Leicester today. I said to him, it's the first time in a long time that I've actually really enjoyed watching the FA Cup final. It was just a really nice occasion. I think it helped the fact that Leicester won and it was their first win. But everything around it, the atmosphere, the fans, the game, the twists and turns, it had everything. It was just such a really good game to watch. And if anything could rekindle the FA Cup and what it means to English football, that game is the perfect example of that. But a really, really good atmosphere in Leicester. Lots and lots of hangovers this morning from a lot of people, and rightly so and well deserved.
Yeah, it was a good final, Chris, wasn't it? To be fair, I enjoyed watching it. It was a tactical game, the first half, but the pundits called it right, and Shearer and that was saying that's the way it would be. Second half, it took the goal to liven things up, and then VAR struck towards the back end of the game to give us that little bit of suspense. And to be honest, it was right again, VAR, but it just spoils the spontaneity because that would have probably gone to extra time, and then who knows? Chelsea could have won it, or it might have gone to penalties.
Yeah, do you know what? It was the best and worst of VAR for me. I mean, when that goal went in, I was shouting, because of how important it was, and obviously I was a little bit gutted for Leicester fans, but equally excited for Chelsea fans because obviously no one's been in the stadium this year, so it must have been fantastic being there as a fan. And then VAR just, it was the correct decision, albeit it was very minor as it's been for most of the season with the VAR calls. They're so tight. But yeah, the right decision was made in the end. And then obviously my opinions changed. I was obviously very, very sorry for the Chelsea fans and obviously delighted for the Leicester fans. But yeah, I found myself, I totally agree with what Pete said. It was a bit of an emotional roller coaster. And I found myself, I had like a bit of a lump in my throat at the end because I thought there's nobody for me deserved that more than that Leicester owner. I was just so delighted for him, and after what happened to his father, absolutely horrendous. And seeing him come on the pitch with Kasper Schmeichel, and all the players are so warm with him and everything. And I was just honestly, I'd even getting tingles talking about it now. It was just so nice to watch, and it was a really, really great game of football, and it was nice to see fans back in the stadium as well. But Leicester fully deserved it, and I'm really pleased for them.
Yeah, Holly, did you watch the cup final?
Yeah, I did. I really enjoyed it. I wanted Leicester to win, definitely, and I think it was well deserved from them. I was a bit gutted when Chelsea equalised, and then obviously VAR ended up ruling it out because I just think the Leicester fans deserved it. And it was just, I'm not one for getting like emotionally involved with other teams' games. Like, they never normally bother us what the score is. But that game, I was just like so happy for them, because you could see how much it meant to the fans. And at full time, the players and then the owner came onto the pitch, and it was just lovely to see, really. And I think it reminded everyone of how much fans are important in these games and why we've missed having the fans in so much. It was just great to see, and I was so happy for all those Leicester fans that were there. And like Chris said, it means a lot for the owner, obviously, with the horrible year that he had with his dad, and then winning the FA Cup. It was just great, and very jealous in terms of being a Newcastle fan, because I would absolutely love to see us be like that in the future. It's what you dream of, really, just having a club that's that together and everyone's on the same page. It's brilliant.
Yeah, Pete, I mean, it's the unity. I mean, I put a tweet out last night about that, just saying that, I was extremely jealous, really, of the way that Leicester look as a football club, as an outsider looking in, that, they've essentially got, an owner who gets it, and, he's not a local lad. He doesn't have any connections locally. He's come in from the outside, but he's come in, he's grasped the football club, he's invested the money in the right place. He's got a blossoming, academy. He's got training ground facilities, which are second to none. And ultimately, he's done what an owner should do. And, when they won the Premier League, he didn't stand still. He didn't do what Jack Walker probably did years ago at Blackburn, and then failed to invest, didn't build on the success, and eventually, as we know, Blackburn ended up dropping out of the Premier League. But Leicester have taken that time. They've always been there or thereabouts, but they're 5 years on from winning the Premier League. They've now won the FA Cup for the first time in their history. I mean, that's what you want as a football fan. Just a little bit of hope, the opportunity to compete, and the outside chance of winning a trophy, and Leicester have delivered 2 in the last 5 years.
Definitely. Look, they've been in charge now since 2010, so it's been a bit of a slow build, if I'm honest, in terms of where they were then to where they are now. However, you are exactly right in what you said. So when they won that league in 2016, it was well documented that it was like the miracle season. It was very, very unexpected. Nobody expected Leicester to do it. They weren't expected to do it again, and I think the club recognised that. But what they used that Premier League winning season is an opportunity to rebuild, and that's exactly what they're doing. I mean, Brendan Rodgers has been a part of the rebuild, and it hasn't always been smooth sailing. Let's be honest. Under Claude Puel, they weren't very good as a team, and had some talented players in that team then. But what they've done is they've invested at the right times. They invested in the right players, with the likes of Ndidi, who could have quite easily come to Newcastle, because we were heavily linked with him at the time, and he ended up going to Leicester. So they've invested in the right players, and then what they've done after that is built the team slowly but surely over time, with the likes of Maddison, with the likes of Perez. Before that, with Iniacho, there's lots of players that they've built, and they've had to sell players. Let's be honest. Kante, Drinkwater, Mahrez, Maguire, lots of players already left the club. Chilwell for 50 million not so long ago. Lost a lot of talented players that won them the Premier League, and they've rebuilt and rebuilt. And the players that they've brought in, Ricardo's, the Justins, you can go through the defence to attack. They've reinvested properly with talented young players, and that's exactly what you want in a club. And you know what? They absolutely love the fans, the community, the city, and what has been repaid in that is that the fans and the club love them as owners, because they realise what they've done for their club. They've took their club from the Championship all the way up to winning the Premier League and now the FA Cup, and they are just building and building and building. It's just so good to watch. I read a lot and see a lot locally. It's fantastic to see. I mean, their training facility is probably one of the best in Europe. There was another picture of it today. It is outstanding. It is so good. Better than anybody else's in the Premier League, in my opinion. And that's just, again, like what Holly said, you just you wish that you had that for your own club, and I hope and pray that we get that in the coming years. I really do.
Yeah, it was nice to see me that make a comment, Chris. Again, just a positive one about the Leicester success, and gives you hope that, should the takeover go through, that we might see something similar like Pete's just suggested.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it kind of gives us a light, as you've said there, Steve, that, it gives us hope, and it gives us kind of like what's the word I'm looking for? Kind of like a blueprint for how we'd like it. We'd like it like that. And, you know, certainly, you know, the noises that we've heard from Dad, and, you know, I think as well, you know, Jamie Rubin, he's been a bit more quieter, but he does look like someone who's going to engage with the fan base. Obviously, he's been it's been well documented that him and you know, the Rubin brothers themselves have been making donations to the food bank. Now, they did that privately. They didn't want that broadcast, but they're really invested in the area. And, you know, that is looking at Leicester and looking at what they've built and what they've become. I mean, that's just what we want to be, isn't it? All we've said is we just want to compete. We want to be a team that tries. And wouldn't it be great, you know, if we, you know, got to a cup final and there was that feel good factor, and we had owners who were invested in the club, invested in the city, and they wanted the best. And that's all we've been after. You know, it's taken, as Pete said, it's taken Leicester 11 years, but you know what? You can tell all the fans absolutely love the owner. You know, they believe in the owner, they believe in the manager they've brought in. They've just done everything correctly. And, you know, it goes back to, you know, when we were, I'd say maybe the late 90s, and I might be wrong saying this, but I'm pretty sure that, you know, it was well documented we were everybody's second club, and that's how Leicester feel now to me. I think a lot of people want to see Leicester do well because, you know, it's a bit of a David and Goliath story. They've come from nothing, but they've invested cleverly. They've put, you know, shown passion and commitment, and they've just wanted to progress as a club. And, you know, now it's just envious, isn't it? You know, I look at Leicester and I just think, wow, you know, they've made some really good signings. I think this season, I'm pretty sure they've only brought in Castagna, but it's a really clever sign. They've tweaked, and that was the frustration from ourselves when we finished 5th under Pardew, because that was a chance for us to push on. And if we had a different owner, I think we would have done. It was about keeping the spine of that team and adding to it. And unfortunately, I'm correct me if I'm wrong, but unfortunately, I think we sold Kabay, and then things just went downhill from there. And we never replaced him properly. And you can see how rapidly we declined. But they've lost a couple of big players, but they've brought in big money, and then they've reinvested the money. And that's the key. It's not about treating the club as a cash cow. It's about making clever decisions and then thinking, right, where can we improve? Where can we improve the squad? You know, if we were to lose, I don't know, say we were to lose a St. Maximin this year, say the takeover didn't happen and we had different owners. If we were to lose a St. Maximin for, say, 50, 60 million, if we were to invest that across the squad, I think a lot of fans would take that. But right now, if we were to lose St. Maximin for 50, 60 million, all that would happen is we'd replace him with someone for 10 million, and then you'd never see that 50 million. And that's the issue. There's no reinvestment in the club. There's no reinvestment in the side. And that's why we want Mike Ashley out. And that's why we're all in uproar all the time.
Yeah, good points, Chris. Good to have you back as well after your break. You feeling a bit better?
Yeah. I'm still not 100%, but I'm much better than what I was. Thanks, Steve. Yeah. And it's really good to be back. And it's nice to be chatting with yourself, Pete and Holly. And I'm looking forward to being on Loaded Mag later as well.
Good stuff. John Askew, update on Pete's team. It's the end of the season, mate. So he's we're just discussing it before we came on air, weren't we? And you said your bloody back's done in. This is the problem when you end up having to go in goal.
Yeah, definitely. There's a reason why I retired from playing the outfield a year or two ago, and now I definitely won't be helping out in goal anymore.
Yeah, good stuff. Okay, we'll bring our first caller on tonight. It's a familiar face, David Reid. Good evening, David.
Hiya.
Good to see you, mate. Good to see you. And congratulations on being a mystic mag and getting it right that Newcastle would stay up. And you put our fears, you tried to allay our fears earlier on in this season, and you were right, mate. So well done.
Yeah, I'd just like to apologise for my positivity. I don't like to say I'm right, but I was right. But as I get told every day, it's always my fault. So I apologise for that.
Yeah, it's good to be humble in these kind of situations, David. But you were right, and I'm pleased you were right. I just, you should have had a few quid on it, mate. Chris McCarthy says, here he is. Wait for the notepad. Good. Oh, God almighty, he's got a hood. It's a scroll of notes. All right, what do you want to say tonight then, David? Apart from I told you so.
Right, 3 points. Bruce, I don't like this loving with Bruce. I think it was more down to the players, because as soon as they didn't sack him after the Brighton game, personally, I felt he should have gone after the Brentford game. But as soon as Ashley said that he was going to stay here after the Brighton game, the players turned it, and it's them to thank, not Bruce. And last two very quickly, I think Lascelles is the mole, and I think Lascelles and Shelby, I think both of them, like so many of my ex-girlfriends, they've served their purpose, and it's time to get rid of them and move on.
These are you've upset Pete.
Yeah,
Well, to be honest, your views on your ex-girlfriends are yours, and definitely not those of NUFC Matters. Holly, will come straight to you.
You don't know them.
All right. Holly will come straight to you. What do you make of Davy's points? Not about his relationship issues, but about Newcastle United issues.
In terms of Steve Bruce, I don't agree. I collectively would give praise to everyone, including Bruce, the coaches and the players. Of course, the players deserve credit, but so does Steve Bruce. I don't think Steve Bruce helps himself as he was getting the fans on side a little bit more than he has across the whole season. And then he gave that TalkSport interview and kind of made everyone go back to being a bit sour. It was totally bizarre from Bruce, and he doesn't help himself. But I do still credit him for the turnaround in form. In terms of the mole, I don't think it's Lascelles, to be honest, but that's an interesting viewpoint. I'm not a Lascelles fan. Everyone pretty much knows that watch these shows. I've said it across the whole season, but I can't see it being Lascelles whatsoever. I think it's more likely to be one of the Longstaffs or someone that hasn't been getting a game, but Lascelles has been played throughout the season, so I don't see why he'd have any reason to kind of go against Bruce and leak stories to the media.
Okay, Chris, what's your take?
Yeah, I'm probably going to go in between David and Holly on this one. So for Bruce, I think you've got to give him some credit to a degree, because I think he took his medicine, so to speak, because he was making mistakes. He should have gone in the Brentford game. You could argue he should have gone in the Sheffield United game. When we got absolutely done over by Sheffield United, and that we were all expecting to win that game and we didn't, and it was more the performance more than anything for me that was the most shocking thing about it. So I would give Bruce some credit. Because, like I say, he righted his wrongs, so to speak. But I do take David's point in that, it's certainly not a loving, but certainly not from my side of things anyway. The TalkSport interview ruined it a little bit, because he came across as a little bit smug, kind of like, I told you so. And you think, well, no, you blatantly got a little bit lucky there. Okay, you changed the personnel up, and that needed to be done. He had that fallout with Richie. He put that to one side, put Richie in the team, as well as Sean Longstaff and Jacob Murphy, which needed to happen. So that's where I think, I've got to give him a bit of praise, albeit I don't think he had much choice. But, he swallowed his pride and he did what he had to do. And ultimately, he's kept Mike Ashley's target of keeping us in the Premier League, and that's the main thing, and that's all we wanted. We just needed to keep our Premier League status, and now we're just all looking forward to the takeover, aren't we? In terms of what you've said about Lascelles and Shelby, David, 1,000,000% I agree. They would be the two people on my list for who would go, takeover or not. I've never been a big fan of John Joe Shelby. I've never been a big fan of Jamal Lascelles. I think that Jamal Lascelles, under Rafa, I think he had real good leadership, and I think that he had good guidance from Rafa. But I think since Rafa's gone, he's kind of been exposed for the centre back that he is. I don't think he's a very good centre back. I don't even think he's a particularly good leader. Credit where credit's due. He scored a couple of really good important goals for us. And I'm not going to take that away from him. I just don't think that he's at the required level. I much prefer the other centre-backs that we've got. And I think that the results that we've had recently, when I found out that Lascelles was injured, I was kind of happy. I hate to say that. I don't wish injury on anybody, but the fact that I knew he wasn't going to be in the team, I thought that was going to be a good thing for us. And, obviously we've picked up those results, which I think is great. But yeah, in terms of Lascelles and Shelby's reached the end now. Shelby is a championship player. He's probably a little bit in the Gale ilk, where he's not quite good enough for the Premier League, but he's probably too good for the Championship. The trouble is, and I've said this before about Shelby, he probably needs to be in a team where they dominate possession and there's not much pressure on him as a central midfielder. The sad thing is, I think he'd probably do a job for one of the top 6 clubs. I firmly believe that if there's not much pressure on him and he doesn't have to do all the dirty work, he probably would be allowed, that freedom to be able to ping balls, and you wouldn't need him to chase other people around. But he can't be in a team where you need 110% effort and you need him to do the dirty work, because he quite simply won't do it. And unfortunately, the good days where he does, ping all these Hollywood balls and really run the midfield are very few and far between, and that's why he won't ever get a top 6, a top 10 club coming for him. It just won't happen. Like, he was linked with West Ham, and the deal never came off, and he ended up staying at Newcastle. And unfortunately for us, that's probably an opportunity we've missed, because I'll tell you now, West Ham won't go anywhere near Jonjo Shelvey. For me, he will probably end up at a newly promoted side, or possibly a team challenging at the top end of the Championship next season if we manage to get rid of him. But shifting that 70, 80 grand a week wages will be difficult. So it'll be interesting to see whether he goes abroad. But yeah, for me, Lascelles and Shelvey need to be first out the door. So I completely agree with that, David. Good points.
Well, I was just going to go to Pete, but he's having internet issues, which is a pity. But yeah, look, Steve Bruce, for me, you've heard us say it time and time again over the last couple of weeks, he deserves the credit for allowing whatever's happened, at the club to take place, because there's clearly an issue with Lascelles, well, not Lascelles, the Longstaffs and Richie, to a lesser extent, Dummett, but, those players all came back in, got games under the belt and kept us up, essentially. So I agree a little bit with you in the sense that it was the players who had to put the effort in and put the, put the practice into, onto the pitch. But for me, you've got to give him a little bit of praise, David, just a little bit. I know it sticks in the back of the throat, because let's face it was him who got us into the mess. But we knew what we were getting when we got Steve Bruce in. He's probably one of the Premier League's worst managers in the history of the Premier League, and you get what it says on the tin, unfortunately. But remember, nobody else wanted the job, so and that was really down to the fact that Raf had left under a cloud. Anybody asking why Raf had left would have been told the truth, and that's not really going to attract people to the club. At least if Steve Bruce stays, whilst the takeover gets put through over the next couple of months, then, we know that he's capable with Graham Jones and his coaching staff of at least keeping Newcastle in the top flight. But it's, I get your point, mate. I do get your point. Anything to say, David?
No, thanks for having us on.
No, good stuff, mate. And you've been great having us, giving us your time and coming on to the 5-minute rant. Much appreciated, mate. And we'll be doing shows throughout the summer, mate. So enjoy your summer and look forward to seeing you next season, mate. Take care.
Thank you.
Good to have David on. We'll try and get Pete back. We've got Jimmy. Hi, Jimmy. How are you?
Hello, guys. How are you doing? Are you all right?
Very good, mate. Good
Hi,
to
Jimmy.
see you. Good to see you. What do you want to say tonight, Jimmy? What do you want to say tonight, mate?
First of all, it's I can understand why David's girlfriends are pissed off.
God, don't say that.
Hoffman and Masters, I want to see them under a bit more pressure from the media,
Yeah.
Because from what I can see, it's quite clear that they're like the Corleone family, aren't they? Yes. You're expecting there'll be a lot of horses' heads and people's cots and stuff like that. It's all just a bit mafia-ish, So I'd like to see them under a bit more pressure, guys. I don't know what your thoughts are. I know what your thoughts will be, because it's quite clear to me what's been going on, especially what's been coming out from Keith and yourselves, like the Amigos and all the guys that are on the channel. It's not looking good for them. And he didn't look very comfortable, did he? When I don't know if you saw the interview with Masters, he didn't look comfortable at all, So I'd like to see somebody like Jeremy Paxman interview him, and really press home and really put him under the cosh. Because if that's what he's like with a normal interviewer, some of these guys in court they'll just smash him to bits, I think. So I'd just like to know your thoughts on that.
Yeah, David Reed has replied and said they are ex-girlfriends, Jimmy.
Right.
I've got to give him a right to reply. Look, my opinion on this is simple. You're 100% right. We do need to put pressure on these guys, and pressure will be applied by the legal bodies. I think that it's great to see Mike Ashley take up not one but two legal options, and obviously one coming through the club, one coming through him, and obviously picking up where Keith has started, and listening to Keith explain things on Friday night, and of course he'll be back on again at the end of this week with a few more gems, is good to hear. And I think it's just a lot of us have been in a bit of a daze for the last 12 months, because all we know is that we want the club bought by the people who want to buy it, and that's it. Most of us are very simple minded like that, in the sense that we just want to see the football club out of Ashley's ownership into these people's ownership, and we can all push on with hopefully building a bastion of invincibility at St James's Park, to nick a couple of words off Bill Shankly. But the whole problem we've had is that just not understanding what is going on, and that's really because of NDAs, etc. And I think that the pressure will be applied to Hoffman in particular, as well as Masters, and I think that will progress over the next few weeks, and I think we will see a change. But how long's a piece of string? We were predicting this time last year that we felt the takeover was close, was imminent. And how wrong were we? I don't know. I just never expected to go on for another 12 months. The only godsend is that it's actually it's still possible. And that in itself is great. And little things we'll keep pointing to them, like the lack of a statement from PIF. Meerdad constantly tweeting about Newcastle or tweeting Newcastle fans. DeMarco's bread pictures. I think all of them are massively positive things, and it's the best we can hope for. Really, it really is. Chris, what's your views on what Jimmy's had to say tonight?
Yeah, Jimmy makes a really good point. I mean, I agree with you as well, Jimmy. Things are quiet, and unfortunately, like Steve said, it's all to do with the NDAs, or certainly that's my opinion anyway. And the sad thing is, I think the media are really sitting on the fence. I think if everything comes out and the takeover goes through, I think they will face more scrutiny and people will criticise them more. But at the moment, they're just choosing to kind of just sit on the fence, not say anything, and just kind of see what happens. We're all sitting here hopeful that something will happen. And we're all praying that this is the calm before the storm, and it certainly feels that way. I mean, I know there was a quote, wasn't there, recently from Amanda Staveley, where she basically said that she couldn't discuss Newcastle United, and some people took that as a negative, but for me that was a big positive, because I just thought, I just thought, I've said this, and I know I keep repeating myself, but I said this at the very start. I fully believe that Amanda Staveley, Meerdad, the Rubens, PIF, I think they'd all come out. If this wasn't going to happen, or if this looked like it was, derailed, I fully believe they'd come out and they'd say, we tried, we did our best. Thank you to all the fans. Thank you to Keith. I think all that has happened, and the fact that it hasn't happened, and as they say, silence is golden. That's certainly where I am with it, and I just feel like we've just got to wait that little bit longer. I think it could be a long summer. But I just hope things come to a resolution sooner rather than later, because we have all waited so long. We can continue to wait, and good things do come to those who wait, as Nick DeMarco said with his cans of Guinness. So I'm certainly hopeful that something will happen, and that Masters and Hoffman are outed for what they've done. And to touch very briefly on the Masters interview, he looked so uncomfortable, didn't he? He looked sick. He looked the panic on his face. He just didn't want to talk about it, did he? He just looked sick. So again, as soon as I saw that, I thought it was great, because if he was confident, and I know Ben Jacobs has said, that from the Premier League side, they all feel very confident about what's coming up. I feel confidence as a Newcastle fan, certainly on, from what Keith said on the Three Amigos, and what Mitch and what Steve and the other Steve have all said. To me, I just feel confident, and I'm just happy to just sit and wait and just see what happens. But I'm just waiting for that statement either from the buying side or from the Premier League to say exactly what's happening. But either way, I think we'll find out in the coming weeks. I just hope it's before the start of the new season, because I really don't want another season of uncertainty. For me, the worst thing that could happen if we had to wait until, say, January, and it was a rush and we had to panic buy and we had to get a new manager in, because you don't know what's going to happen between the start of the season and January. A lot can happen. And if we make a terrible start to the season, I worry about us staying up then.
Yeah, Holly, what do you make of what Jimmy's had to say?
I agree with him totally. I think the fact that the fans have been clueless to what's going on pretty much throughout the whole process has been shocking. I know that there's not much you could do about it, because there is agreements to kind of keep things private and behind closed doors, but I just feel like it's shocking, because I think it's as much of the fans' business as anyone else's that's involved in that case. Yeah, it is. And the fans are the most important people, to be fair. So, but what can you do? And I just hope that we get a result one way or the other sooner rather than later, because I know no one wants us to fail, but I'd rather just know now, because I'm getting really sick, and I know a lot of people are. And the more it goes on, you just panic more and more. And going into the new season, if we're still in this mess, I just think it's going to impact Newcastle negatively, because while we've got this air of uncertainty hanging over us, we can't invest properly, we can't get managers, players, and everything's just a mess. It's up in arms, and no one knows what's meant to be happening. So I don't think it's healthy for Newcastle. I hope we don't have another summer like last one, where we're constantly checking social media all the time. And I hope, like Chris, it goes through before the season, but I genuinely can't see it happening personally. I think we will get a result. I'm hoping it's in our favour, but it just, the length of it going on now is very, very worrying for me. And each day goes by, and I think I lose a bit of confidence. I know that everyone else is pretty much confident for going through, and I'd like to say that, but it's more hope now, I think, for me. It's just awful. It's a really awful situation. And I just feel like while this is hanging over us, Newcastle can't really move forward. So we need it to be sorted.
Yeah, we've got a couple of people lined up. We'll just go to you, Pete, quickly. I know you probably missed Jimmy's question, but he was just saying, do you think Hoffman and Masters will be held accountable? He feels that there should be. He feels like a Jeremy Paxman interview would be something that would be beneficial, because, he just feels the need to be held to account.
They do, 100%. They are the reason why we're having to wait over a year for this decision to be made. There's no doubt about it. And actually, as we get closer and closer within this arbitration, and the more information that's coming out, it points even more to both Hoffman and Masters, even more so now than it did this time last year. So, they have to be held to account. And I mentioned it on Matchday Live that I honestly believe that when this takeover goes through, it won't be long before both of them are out of a job because of what they've created. Now, this does need to be resolved. It needs to be resolved not just for our sanity and for our sake. I think it also needs to be resolved from the Premier League's point of view. The Premier League should not want this being dragged out into a new season. The one thing they will want is for the Super League and our situation with our takeover to be resolved, so they can literally draw a line under it all and move on into a new season. That should be the want from either side. Whether that happens or not, I have no idea. If this takeover is going to go through in which we can start to rebuild this summer going into next season, for me, it has to be done around the July mark. Anything else after that, we're not going to be able to impact on the club in terms of buying players and really trying to start the rebuilding process until sort of January, certainly from the playing side. And that's never ideal for the points that Chris made. If we have a difficult start to the season, you can never always buy what you want to in January. So it'll be a case of panic buying, and it's just not the same. If you've got a full summer to really rebuild, know who you want to keep, give the opportunity for the new manager, hopefully Rafa, to come in and have some time with the players to get them ready for the new season. You'd want it done by July, which is the start of pre-season. That's where you would want it to be done. So I still hold a little bit of hope that it can get done. It could get done. I've read on the internet that the arbitration can be done within a week. It's just a case of when it actually starts. So the actual process of arbitration won't take too long. It's just a case of when it gets going. And then we've got to remember that the turnover of the transfers and the signing on the dotted line of the change of ownership is going to take the best part of a couple of weeks as well. So we have to bear that in mind too. So there's all that has to go on and play on in the background. I just hope that we get it resolved this summer, because our club needs it for our own sanity and for the history of the club. We need it now.
Yeah, I agree. Jimmy, great stuff, mate. Got everybody's answer there, I hope, and thanks for contributing tonight, mate.
Thanks very much for having us on, guys. Top show, man.
Take care, mate.
Take care.
Cheers, Jimmy.
Good to see Jimmy again. Mockler, we'll come to you now, mate. How are you?
All right, lads. I'm well, yourselves?
Very good, very good, mate. What have you brought us tonight? What do you want to discuss?
I want to say a massive well done to Leicester City. Absolutely fantastic. I think I celebrate their goal like Newcastle United goal, to be perfectly honest. It was absolutely brilliant. Can you imagine actually going to the field if they won a trophy like they did yesterday with the owners? Leicester City is how a club should be run, top to bottom. Fans love the owners. Owners care about the club, and you can see that massively yesterday. Like the interview with Schmeichel, he was nearly in tears watching that, talk about the owners, the club. It was just a breath of fresh air to watch it. And also against the Super Six, it was just great to watch. Secondly, well done, Steve Bruce. Got the award, done what you needed to do. But now it's time to go. I want to see the next 3 games. I want to see the Longstaff brothers playing. I want to see Willock playing. I want Shelby dropped now, just because 3 games a season, there's nothing to play for. Can we just try something different? If we finish 4th bottom of the league now, it makes no difference. We're escape relegation, but I just want to see what the Longstaff brothers with Willock can do. 2 runners with Shelby, get the ball passed on. Because if it wasn't for Maxi, we would be relegated right now. I do feel that. I feel that with Maxi, he's our kingpin player. And if we don't get took over in the summer, he will be gone. Roma have reported 40 million. Don't know how true that is. But he could play in any team in the Premier League, Maxi. Like, he could fit in that Man City team and won't look out of place, because he's a born winner. And I just hope now, listen to Keith with the takeover and things like that, that is something coming. Something will happen this week with the anti-law, because the 28 days is up. I think it's Friday. It's up, so the Premier League's got to respond some way. And I can't have another summer waiting for this takeover, because it's mental health now. Since March last year, I signed Twitter for the first time, just reading news. I'm in the anti-corruption law now. I know Saudis have backed my hand. I just want Newcastle United took over. I just want to watch my team do well. And Mickey Gray on Friday said, what do Newcastle fans want? I don't want my team to be in League One. I just want my team to compete and do well like Leicester City. I don't ask for much, to be perfectly honest.
Great point, Mockler. Chris, what's your take on what he's had to say tonight?
Yeah, absolutely spot on, Mockler. Absolutely spot on, mate. Like, touching briefly on what you said about Leicester, absolutely. We were talking about that earlier on in the show, and you know that the key word is envy, because it was just everything that you want from your football club. You know, the fans are all united, the owner, everything about the club, it just makes you smile, and it just gives you that good feeling. And, you know, I was so pleased that they won yesterday, not taking anything away from Chelsea. I mean, Chelsea will have their eyes on that Champions League, and rightly so. But I was just so made up for them. And, you know, when I saw, you know, the owner with the trophy and they're all looking up to the sky pointing, it was just incredible. It was one of the nicest moments from the whole season for me. And, you know, even that from a Newcastle fan, I just thought it was lovely. It was just so good, and it real feel good factor. So that was great. I think your points on Bruce are absolutely spot on. I think the attitude that you've had is absolutely right. You've got to give him some credit. You've got to. And you know what? He fully deserved the manager of the month for the results that he pulled out. Whether or not it was him that maybe had that much involvement, but the key thing for me was he allowed that to happen. Now, he could have been stubborn. He could have kept with the same team. He could have said, "No, I'm doing it my way." You know, as that you know, that famous quote that he did. And to be fair to him, he buckled a bit, and he went back to what you know, we were all crying out for, probably what Graham Jones was crying out for, and he made the changes that were needed. Has he learned from them? I hope he has. Whether that be with us next season or at another club, I hope that he's realised that, you know, perhaps his backroom staff aren't the best, and that perhaps he does need help and he needs to change his ways. But I don't want to see Steve Bruce in the hot seat next season. I've resigned myself to the fact that I believe he will start the season, unless something, groundbreaking happens between now and the start of next season. So I'm kind of resigned to it. But I'm hoping that this season makes him a better manager. But I just wish that he hadn't come out, on TalkSport and gave that interview, that he had it all under control, and he was kind of giving it back to us fans, because let's be honest, you still look at his record and it's appalling. It's absolutely appalling, and the stats don't lie. And the reason that we are not in the bottom three is because Fulham basically imploded. West Brom didn't have enough, and Sheffield United just weren't good enough. So that is the reason that we're staying up. And as you rightly say, probably St. Maximin, they are the reasons that we are staying up. I'm absolutely delighted by it, and Bruce has done what he's needed to do. But I'd certainly stop at a certain point to the praise for Bruce. In terms of the last few games of the season, we've got two very winnable games. So we've got Sheffield United at home, and then we have Fulham away. For me, I'd be going for 6 points. But on the other hand, even with the Man City game the other night, a little bit disappointing that we didn't get anything from it. But wasn't it a nice change to see us go at them? We had to go at them, and we tried.
Brilliant.
Yeah, it was. And you know what? We lost 4-3. But we had a right good go, and Joe Willock's just coming on every game, isn't he? He just looks. And now, before his goal streak, people were saying about signing him. I was kind of a little bit on the fence, and now I hope we do sign him, because he clearly wants to be here. He's trying for the shirt, and when you play him in his right position, shock horror, he actually does a decent job. But in terms of what I'd like to see Matty Longstaff get a run out like yourself. I'd like to see Sean Longstaff in there as well and drop Shelvey. Probably won't happen, but that's just what I'd like to see. I'd like to see Elliot Anderson get a few minutes. I'd like to see Andy Carroll get the swan song. I'm saying he deserves. I'd like to see him get it. He's. I still find it a bit odd, and obviously I've been off for the last couple of weeks, Smochler, but I still find it odd that people say that that Carroll's finished. Now, don't get me wrong, he's not the player he was, but even the cameos that he made, the cameo performances he came on and he changed the game. I'm not saying he should be starting every week for 90 minutes, but he's still got something to give, and he wants to be in that shirt, and he wants to play for Newcastle United. And for me, I would much rather have an Andy Carroll coming on for the last 20 minutes than Dwight Gale, who quite blatantly doesn't want to be here and is picking up his pay packet. So for me, I would rather see an Andy Carroll in the team. If we get the takeover tomorrow, do I want Andy Carroll in the team next season? No. But if we don't get this takeover, we've got to upgrade certain positions. I'm assuming Muto's going to go. I'm assuming Gale's going to go if we sell him on. I'd keep Carroll. I would. I'd give him keep him on pay as you play, and I'd keep him in and around the squad. As long as he's not on 100 grand a week, which we all know he's not, for me, I don't really see the problem. But I'd like to see these next two games as being a little bit experimental. I'd like to see us maybe go with something that maybe we've not tried in the past. They are free shots. They are games we should be winning, and I want us to finish as high as possible. We can finish with a maximum of 45 points. In the ideal world, that's what we want to do. But I'd also like to see him try, tweak a few things, try a few new different systems. And also I'd like to say, well done to Emil Kraft for getting his goal as well. He's come in for a lot of stick, equally from me. But he got his goal and he looked okay. Again, do I want him next season? Probably not, but well done to him for getting his goal.
Yeah.
I think with Kraft, do you not think he... Sorry. Do you think with Kraft, he's a better centre-back than he is a right-back?
Probably. There's probably not much in it, though. I don't particularly like him in either position, but yeah, I take your point. He's definitely not a right wing back with a 5 at the back. I definitely don't want to see him anywhere near that. He probably is more of a right back. He's a bit of a steady Eddie, isn't he? But I think we've already got a steady Eddie in Manquillo, and I'd rather Manquillo. We definitely need to upgrade the right back position for me next season.
Holly, what's your take on Mockler's point?
Yeah, he made some great points. Starting with the Leicester point, I think that during the takeover, like obviously if we got Saudi ownership, then we got compared a lot to Man City, and that's like what we'd be like. That's not necessarily how I'd want Newcastle to be. I think I'd rather us be a Leicester, because building slow and steady, not just buying success, and also not having loads of glory supporters that would jump on the bandwagon. I'd like to keep the core of the fan base the same, because I just think that would be awful, honestly. Also, Steve Bruce, yes, I agree. Definitely deserve man of the match. I keep saying man of the match, but it's manager of the month. And yeah, he deserves a bit of credit. I do want to see him go at the end of the season, regardless. I think it would be a good time for him to leave, because he could leave with a little bit of respect, because he has kept Newcastle up after it looked like it was going to be a different end to the season. And that's great. And then we can wish him well and he can move on. But to be honest, though, if the takeover doesn't go through, I don't think we're going to get a decent manager to come in, especially with the air of uncertainty. So I think we'd have to stick with Bruce. And I wouldn't want it to happen, but I wouldn't be totally annoyed by it. Like, I would accept it, because I think, right, okay, well, we're not probably going to get anyone better, and at least Bruce knows the players and stuff. There is the concern, obviously, of financial backing, because I'm not sure Ashley would shell out the money like he did last summer to reinvest in the squad. And St. Maximin, who you mentioned, I think he would be the first to go. If he went for 40 million, I think that's a steal, to be honest. I think 40 million is very, very cheap for St. Maximin. And he is part of the reason why we've stayed up this season, because he adds something different to that team that we don't already have. He's not the main player. I think Callum Wilson's probably been the most important player for us this season, but St. Maximin, of course, has been brilliant. And finally, on the whole takeover point, I think that we need the result in the summer, because if we don't have the result in the summer, like I've mentioned, we're probably not going to get that back in, and we probably are going to end up in absolute limbo in the season. And like Chris mentioned for the previous caller, like, if we have a bad start of the season, we'll go into the January window and we have very little points, or we're in the bottom three. It's just going to be a disaster, really. And then there's that whole threat of going down again, which you just don't want to happen.
Okay, Pete, your views? Oh, you're on mute, mate. You're on mute.
Sorry, the screen band was going by, so my bad. Mockler, firstly, fantastic points. Really, really good points. Really enjoyed listening to you. So top man for that. First and foremost, you're absolutely right. Steve Bruce, fair enough, he's won Manager of the Month. He deserved it to an extent. Particularly if you look at the fixtures in which he got his results from, were very, very tough fixtures. So fair play to him. But you know what? It's the perfect time for him to walk away with a little bit of dignity and a little bit of credit right now. He's kept us up. We're playing some decent football. He's going into the last two games where we could quite easily win both of them and win them both comfortably. It's the perfect time for him to walk away and keep his reputation intact, and to keep his media friends happy, and he can go off and find another job elsewhere. I personally don't think he wants to stay in the job, if I'm honest, and I think his press conferences recently, particularly his last one before Man City, alluded to that there are talks that need to be had. But personally, I don't think he wants to stay at the club, and I think they're going to try and talk a way out of his contract so he can walk away in the summer. And if we don't get a takeover, for me, Eddie Howe is the man. I think that's the reason why he's holding on and not accepted the Celtic job as yet, because I think he looks at Newcastle as a potential for him. However, with a takeover, Rafa Benitez is the only one that's coming back to the club. It's as simple as that. But I don't see Steve Bruce guaranteed being in the hot seat at the beginning of the next season. I don't think he wants to come back to 52,000 fans getting on his back. And even if we don't do it straight the way next season, I think all it would take is one defeat and we'll be right back where we were this season, right on his case, right on his back. So that's my point on him. Very quickly on John Joe Shelby. I don't think he's played bad recently. I think his running stats were up that I saw today that were one of the best in the team alongside Willock. And actually, if you look at his running stats in previous games, they've been up there. So it's not that he's not running hard for the team. I think it's his positional play and his lack of defensive nous that lets him down as a midfielder, and it's key. Whereas other guys like Hayden's, like your Longstaffs, like your Willocks, do know where to be in defensive positions and can be better defenders. For me, this is potentially his last two games for Newcastle, because if we do get the takeover, he's not playing for us again. Certainly not playing for us under Rafa Benitez, and that's just the way I'm looking at it. Yes, he's in the team right now. Do we want him in the team? Not necessarily, but for me, the clock is ticking down on him being a regular in this team, or actually even being at the club. So I'm not overly bothered by the fact that he's playing at the moment. I'm just kind of riding the wave and see what happens after that. There were so many other good points, and some of them have completely gone out of my head. I have to be honest. Like we've already said with the takeover, we just need to wait and see what's happening with that. We need it. as a fan base. We need that takeover to go through. If this club is going to be what a Leicester City is. The one thing that really hit home to me yesterday is watching those Leicester City celebrations, and I didn't mention it earlier, is the owner. When he lifted the trophy up, he lifted it up to where the picture of his dad was in the corner of Wembley, and it was just that moment there just got me straight away, because that's what it means. I look at Jose Perez, for example, the way he hugged the owner and the way the owner hugged him back. There was a connection there. He's a player that's not even been there very long. He wasn't there when the owner's dad passed away, But there's a connection there. Yuri Tillemans, every single one of them, Madison. There's a feel. There's not a gap between the owner and the manager. There's not a gap between the manager and the players. They are all as one. They're a family, and it's so evident in everything. Not just the FA Cup win, but every game, every week. There is a connection there between them all, a real special bond. And that moment there just typified everything. And that's what we're missing. We don't effectively have an owner because he doesn't care about the club. There is no connection. Steve Bruce said it in his press conference. When was the last time he spoke to Mike Ashley? Did he congratulate him on the win at Leicester? No. He hasn't even spoke to him. It's stuff like that. There's no connection there to the owner and the manager whatsoever. And then there's a clear distance between the players and the manager, because they're not playing for him. They're playing for themselves, and they're playing for the shirt, the fans, the club. They're not playing for the manager right now. That's a given. So I just wanted to kind of add my point on that. But Mockler, absolutely spot on. Made some really, really good points. Great to have you on, mate. Top man.
Yeah, Mockler. Thanks. Hi, and Holly. Yeah, don't forget Holly. Mockler, thanks very much, mate. Thanks for your support. Hope you can get back on again soon, mate. Take care.
Cheers, lads. Look after yourselves. Bye-bye.
Bye. Good to have Mockler on, new face, and big shout out to everybody who has put their head above the parapet on the 5-minute rant this season. It's been great. We'll have another one next week before we move off into the summer content. Big shout out to Spider VPN, who've been with us for the last 4 months for all your internet security. Just Google Spider VPN, takes you straight to their website at the top of the search engine. And to skipsandbins.com, telephone 0800 25 45 25 3, email inquiries at skipsandbins.com, website www.skipsandbins.com. Easy contract, free and pay as you go waste collection. There's Sir Bobby as christened on Friday night show, and also a big shout out to qtechshop.co.uk, the makers of pool tables and snooker tables in Wallsend, Newcastle, who've been with us all the way through, and Jab Signature, whose new range was getting a bit of an airing on Twitter today. If you want to subscribe to the channel, then hit the Newcastle Legends badge in the bottom right hand corner, and that's it. You've subscribed. Hit the thumb up to like the video today. That does help us. And click the share button and share it to your social media. Hit the comments button to join people in the chat. And final call at night, Barry Hogan. How are you, Barry?
Hiya, guys. You all right? Hiya, Holly.
Hiya.
It's been a few weeks since I've been on. I've been stuck at work, as Steve probably remembers.
Yeah, I went for my job, and there's a guy sitting there with a mask on. I'm going, I recognise that face. And of course, it was Barry on reception.
Bless him.
Good to see you, mate. Good to see you.
I was gutted because I'd missed Supermac coming in as well, so I was absolutely gutted. But at least I got to see you.
Well, it was nice to meet you. Nice to put a name to the face at last. And I see you've got your Kabai era shirt on there.
I thought I might get Maximum on the back of it just to keep it going a bit.
Fair enough, mate. Fair enough. Good stuff. What do you want to say tonight, Barry?
I've got a couple of points about Newcastle, but I mean, the first one for me, and this seems to sort of dissipate in the background. It's about the whole punishment scenario for the Big Six. This whole thing, not just the Big Six in this country, but obviously the other countries that are involved, basically trying to rip up their country's football leagues, financially wise, for themselves, didn't give a stuff about anybody else, and bugger off to a class, a European Super League. All this sort of, the fans' furor came out. It was all hell on and everything else. There was all this, we can't do that. We're really, really sorry. They're going to get punished, blah, blah, blah. Where's the punishment gone? There's no punishment being handed out to any of these teams, including the six in England. So you've now got the European Cup final with two of these so-called Big Six playing in it. So you've got the two sides in there. You've got Chelsea playing in the FA Cup final yesterday, which thank God Leicester won, because I would have been absolutely sick if Chelsea had won it, because they don't deserve it. Me personally, guys, I want to know what you think, but for me, they should have been stripped of their places in the Champions League. They should have been kicked out the final if they'd get into that stage. So for me, the Champions League final should have been two teams who didn't plan to nick off from their own national leagues, which would have meant it falling down to PSG versus Porto, because anybody else in the Champions League sort of top semi-finals upwards were all greedy scumbags like the rest of them and trying to nick off to somewhere else. So it would have meant as well for our national game, the FA Cup final would have been Leicester v Southampton, not Chelsea. Chelsea don't deserve to be there. They don't deserve anything for their behaviour. I know, and I've heard you guys talk about it on the various programmes, Steve, about hurting the fans or hurting the club. The only way you can hurt the clubs is to take money off them. And for me, getting to the European Cup final, it then increases their sponsorship and everything else for next year because the European Cup finalists, the two teams who are in the European Cup final, neither of them deserve to be there. Their behaviour was disgusting. You know, they didn't give a monkeys about UEFA. They didn't care about the Champions League. All they cared about was the European Super League. So what's happening now? They're now talking about their punishment for this behaviour, and this trying to rip everything up is taking off 0.6% of their annual income from next season's European competitions. That's what UEFA's talking about. I mean, what happens to the teams like Arsenal who don't even necessarily qualify for Europe? Do they pay nothing? So that is the only punishment these scumbags are going to get for trying to destroy our national game. Nothing's going to happen to them in the Premier League because, as Steve and the guys have pretty much proven on Keith's show, where Keith was on the other night, that Masters and his sidekick were basically in the back pocket of the European Super League to get jobs once they moved. How many others of these scumbags at Europe's top level, at UEFA's top level, were going to get the same sort of thing once this new league was up and running? I mean, this whole comment about, well, we can't have the European Cup final in England because you're not prepared to let our UEFA people, special VIP guests in without getting COVID checked. So we're going to move it to Portugal. I mean, how weird. You know, what sort of a corrupt business is it? It's just, I mean, don't get us wrong, guys. I'm over the moon for Newcastle. I think they've done really well. I cannot stand Steve Bruce. I can't give him credit for the way the players have played. The players have done it. I strongly believe the rumour that Bruce had the whole thing of team selection taken off him. That was going around that he wasn't choosing the team for the last 3 or 4 games of the season, that somebody higher up said, look, we've had enough of you. If it's left to you, it's taking us down. And I think I agree with Steve totally. The likes of Dummett, the likes of Matt Ritchie have kept us up. Not the likes of Steve Bruce. I don't think his little 2 sidekick coaches have done it. I think Callum Wilson kept us up probably whilst he was injured against Leicester. And it's so infuriating because, like Holly said before, you've got 2 trains of thought coming. Next season, we've got the takeover or the non-takeover. So the takeover, Rafa comes in, we could get anybody. Rafa's scouting system is immense. Like Chris, I think, said the other day, Rafa's network of scouts could get us God knows who. You know, unknown players who turn out to be absolute superstars. Or what's the other scenario? We'll get rid of Bruce. Sean Dyche comes in, which is the rumour again this morning. We'll sign Andros Townsend, Jetro Williams and Kyle Bartley on free transfers and sell maximum for 40 million quid. I know what I'm playing for during the close season, guys. If it's not the takeover, I really don't want to be watching it next season. It's just Sean Dyche or Steve Bruce.
Go on, the people. What do you make of what Barry's had to say in the mid?
Again, some really, really, really good points, Barry. Absolutely spot on. First and foremost, you are absolutely right about the punishments in the sanctions for the supposed Big Six. Giving them fines isn't going to solve anything. Giving them a fine is basically just giving them a slap on the wrist. It's nothing. They'll pay it without even a second thought, because whatever they pay in fines, they'll probably get back next month in terms of their revenues with regards to shirt sales and sponsorships, and whether it's Premier League or Champions League, whatever money it is, they'll get that money back easily. So it's nothing, right? Where you need to hurt them is not through the money, is through the power, and the power is the top European competitions, and by taking them out of the Europa League, taking them out of the Champions League, taking them out of Europe completely, whether it's a 1 or 2 seasons, is going to hurt them, because that's where they get the exposure, that's where they get the sponsors, that's where they get the additional finances for playing in those competitions, that's where they attract the best players. That's where you're going to hurt them. But ultimately, by doing that, you're then hurting them in their pocket, because they don't get that financial benefit of being in the Champions League. So that's where you have to hurt them. You could get a points deduction here or there, fair enough. You know, a 3.6 points here isn't going to make the world of difference to those teams that are used to winning every week. It just won't make that much of a difference. So, you know, you're exactly right in what you said. But I think, you know, taking them out of the competitions, whether it's a 1 or 2 seasons, is the way to go.
Do you think it's going to happen though, Pete? Do you
No, I
think they're going to do it?
No, I don't. I think they tried to be, UEFA and the Premier League tried to be big bully boys in terms of bossing them around, and they managed to get the reaction that they wanted, although that was probably more Carragher and Neville in their stance on Sky Sports that probably got the traction and the reaction that was necessary for that. And, you know, what they've done now is they've managed to get them around the table to a point where the European Super League is no longer viable, or no longer going ahead, and now they're panicking again, because what should have come very quickly after that were hard sanctions straight the way, and it never happened. And the longer this goes on, the lighter the sanctions are likely to be. That's just my opinion. But you made some great points on Steve Bruce. Absolutely right. I talked about how, you know, he got the manager of the month, and he deserves it to a point. He deserves it because his title is the head coach or the manager, whichever one you want to name him. That's why he deserved it, because he holds the title in good and bad, so he deserves it from that point of view. But as I'd already talked about with the previous caller, Mockler, the players weren't and are not playing for the manager. They are playing for themselves, the club and the fans. That's who they're playing for. Now, I'm not praising Steve Bruce for bringing Matt Ritchie back into the team and Sean Longstaff into the team. Those guys should have been playing anyway. So I'm not praising him for something that he should have been doing in the first place. I'm not praising him for something that the fans, we on Matchday Live, were calling for back in December, to play these guys, to give them minutes. They need to get back in the team. You know, I'm not praising him for that. Okay, he's made the decision, fair enough, but he's made it because his job and his reputation and the club's reputation and its club's history was on the line. So he had to. And it wouldn't even surprise me if he was forced to make those decisions to get those players back in the team. And the fallout with Richie was probably a big reason behind that. So that's just my point on Steve Bruce as well. I can't remember your last point that you made, Barry. Sorry.
I was just about, obviously, the 2 avenues, takeover, non-takeover wise. Obviously, the real concern that it, like everybody else, you're sitting there with your fingers crossed, thinking that the takeover is going to go through. I still believe it will, but like you guys said before, I think you're hitting on the head, Pete, with it's the time scale. If it doesn't happen before July, I totally agree that it's too late to do anything about it.
Yeah,
it's not enough time to bring anybody in to sort of improve the team ready for the season.
If there's anyone that could get this team up and running at a short notice, it is Rafa Benitez. And you talked about the scouting network. I talked about that of Rafa Benitez on Friday night on the Matchday Live. His scouting network is the best in Europe, better than any other manager, including Jose and Pep. And it has been for a long, long time. He knows players, whether expensive or cheap, to get in and really, really make a difference to this team immediately. If there's any manager that I'd want to come in at short notice on a takeover, it's Rafa Benitez. So I'm not overly worried about that to a point, but I want him to have more time with the team, so we're raring and running, steamrolling teams ready to go at the beginning of the season. That's why I'd want it done as soon as possible. But again, Barry, fantastic points. Well done.
Good stuff. Holly, what's your take on Barry's points tonight?
Yeah, he's spot on, really. In terms of the top 6, like getting the punishments and stuff, I think we all kind of predicted that not much would really happen. The Premier League would kind of just let them to get away with it. Little fines isn't really going to do anything. The wealth of these teams is so great that whatever the fines are, it's not really going to matter to them. They'll make that money back so quick, like Pete said, from whatever TV money. They'll make it back plus a bit more, so it doesn't really make a difference. I think they do need to be banned from the leagues, or a transfer ban. I wouldn't just ban them for 1 year either. I'd ban them for probably a minimum of 5 years. And I know that sounds really harsh, but 5 years, it would learn them a lesson, because I don't think that they realise how serious the thing that they've done actually is. If this was to go ahead, people need to remember that this would have ruined the national game forever. And that's a lot longer than 5 years. So 5 years is nothing really compared to the price we would have had to pay if this had went through. And then also, if they got sick after that 5 years and they wanted to sell the clubs, it would make the clubs harder to sell, because big owners wouldn't want to come into a club that's got transfer bans and is banned from the European League. So the owners need to be the ones that suffer. I know that it's going to be hard for the fans and stuff, and maybe they don't deserve it, but I'm sorry, you're just going to have to ignore that and punish these clubs, because their actions have been appalling. But no surprise there, the Premier League let them get away with murder. And they probably will still continue to show bias towards them. I don't know why, because those 6 clubs have really smacked the Premier League in the face, but the Premier League seem to still want to be pally with them, so that's up to them. I just think they're really stupid, to be honest, from top to bottom. Also, your points regarding Steve Bruce, yeah, I do agree. I said I was happy to give him a bit of praise, but I do think the main part of the praise is down to the players, and also I don't believe that they are playing for Steve Bruce. I think they're doing it more for the fans and the club and themselves, because none of those players would want to be relegated, of course, because that would be bad for their CV. And it's not really going to do anyone any favours if Newcastle got relegated, is it? To be honest, it's not going to be good for the club, the fans, the players, Bruce, anyone. So fair enough. They realised Bruce wasn't going to go anywhere, and they've changed how they were playing and sorted it out. And yeah, they deserve praise for that. Also, your final point on the 2 avenues at the end of the season. This is my biggest worry. Honestly, I'm trying not to think about it too much, because it literally just gets you down to think about it. But I can see the takeover dragging on into the new season, if I'm being honest. And I hope I'm wrong with that. I hope and pray that I'm wrong about that. But if it does, again, we're putting our future at risk, because I think we'll be in a relegation battle yet again. I don't think we'll get the back, and we will be on free transfers. I'd probably stick with Steve Bruce as the manager, because we wouldn't get anyone better. Better the devil, sort of thing. And we, I know you mentioned Sean Dyche, but I don't think he'd want to leave Burnley to come to Newcastle, because it's not much of a better job at the moment, is it really? You might get a bit more money, but probably not. And so, yeah, we just need to try and hope and pray this takeover goes through. Otherwise, we're in a massive mess next season. But I'm trying not to think about it, because it'll just get us stressed.
After watching the games, the Fulham games towards the end of the season, I'd rather take Parker. I'd rather give Scott Parker a chance. He's got the links to the club. He had such a fight and such a passion about him. I would, if we were stuck with Ashley, I'd rather take Parker.
Never been a fan of Parker since he stuck the fingers up in the fans, but that's just my choice. That's my view.
Ollie Clark.
Yeah, just one of those, he's smarmy for me. I wouldn't have him, and he's not tried and tested, and he's just had a club relegated. That's my view, Barry. That's my view. But I understand what you're saying, and if you had a bit of a budget, but the last thing you need is a rookie manager coming into a club like Newcastle will make Ashley as the owner. That's my honest opinion. I think you'd end up with a major issue, But who knows? The most unexpected managers are a success. Southampton's proof of that in recent years. They've employed managers completely, from off the map. People you've never heard of. They've come in and bang. Look at the current manager they've got. Nobody really would have had him down as a first choice. People tend to go through the same names, the same list. So you never know. Scott Parker could be a success at Newcastle, but he wouldn't be for me. Chris, finish off with you, mate, before we crack on. We've gone into extra time, and I know you've got another show to do tonight. But some great points made by Barry. What's your view on that?
Yeah, Barry, as always, mate, really good points, and I think Pete and Holly have summed it up really well. But in terms of the big 6 punishments, I feel quite strongly about that, because I think they should get a fine in terms of the ownership. But I do take your point in that they probably wouldn't feel it as much, but I do think it should be there. I think if you I said this a while back, if you give them all, say, £100 million fine, and then it got fed into the lower leagues, that would be my preference. But to add into that as well, it is all about power, and there should be there should be like a transfer ban, as Holly said, or just some kind of restriction. I mean, the thing for me is I wouldn't like to see them punished by way of removing them from cup competitions and stuff like that, because for me, you're then punishing the players and the fans. And as we all saw, the players, the fans, the managers had no involvement in this whatsoever. And that's why I think it'd feel a bit uncomfortable for me, because, you'd then be punishing them when really, they had no say in this whatsoever. Difference if it had gone out and all the fans had voted for it, you go, okay, yeah, you take it now because that's that's the route you wanted to go down. But I think because everybody was kept in the dark, and we are talking, I mean, give or take a couple, you are talking about 6 people, 6 individuals, rather than a total club. So therefore, I'd rather hit the individual owners themselves in the pocket, and then, further down the leagues benefit from that. And then also in terms of, punishing the owners by way of restricting their capabilities to be able to buy players and things. Obviously, there is a small knock-on effect for fans in that sense, but you do need to give out and dish out some kind of punishment. In terms of Bruce, now again, I take your point, and I know we've all said this, and so I won't go on about it too much. But yeah, for me, I've got to give him some credit, because do I think Ashley's intervened and said, right, you take one, you step to one side? Absolutely not. I don't think Ashley's interested whatsoever. So the only person who stepped to one side and took on board other people's opinions and other people's views is Steve Bruce. He should have been doing it from the start. Totally agree with Pete's point, but the fact that he's acknowledged that changes need to be made, and that he's took on board other people's comments and other people's views, and those changes have been made, I think that's where you've got to give him some bit of credit, because he could have just stuck his feet in and gone, "Nah, I'm not moving. This is the formation I want to play. These are the players I want to play. Like it or lump it, sack me." But he didn't. He accepted that maybe he was wrong, and like I said before, I just hope that he's learned from it, and I hope that going into the new season, where I expect him to still be at the helm, I just hope that he does take that on board and he just learn from it. Whether he will or not, I don't know. And just to very briefly touch on the discussions we had around Rafa, yeah, Rafa's one of those people, isn't he? He's very methodical, and Rafa, knowing him, he's probably already planning for certain jobs. I'm sure we're one of them, but it wouldn't surprise me if he was planning to go into Serie A or La Liga, whether he knows that there's opportunities to go into there. He's probably still looking at players. I heard something the other day about him still messaging some of the Newcastle players, which again doesn't surprise me. He, as Pete said, he is the kind of person where if you had to bring someone in last minute, it would be Rafa Benitez, because he's so planned. He's already been in the hot seat. He knows how it works. He gets the fans. He gets the club. He would be fantastic to bring in. So I would be really excited if we brought Rafa Benitez in. If something came out tomorrow and they said no takeover, for me, and it might not be everyone's cup of tea, but I'd like to see someone maybe like Frank Lampard come in. I think he was very unlucky at Chelsea. I think he got a real tough end of the stick with Chelsea there. I think they needed to stick with him. But on the other hand, Tuchel's come in and he's done a great job. So maybe Abramovich has made the right decision there. But yeah, I think Frank Lampard's got plenty more to give. And I think he'll have learned from the experience. And I take Steve's point in the fact that he is inexperienced, but somebody like Frank Lampard, the players in there would have ultimate respect for him because of what he's done in the game and the midfielder that he was. So I'd like to have a punt at Frank Lampard if the takeover doesn't go through and we're stuck with Mike Ashley. But whilst the takeover's in limbo, whilst we're all waiting, no manager in the right mind would take this job. So I think we're best just sticking with Bruce. And whether it's takeover or non-takeover, if it's takeover, I want Rafa. If it's non-takeover, I'd probably go Lampard and just go for somebody who's, albeit he's only been at 2 clubs in Derby and Chelsea, but I think he's got a lot of potential. I think the players that stand up and listen to him, I think he'd bring new ideas. I think he's ambitious, and I think he's genuinely an all right bloke. I'm not all that keen on Parker. I think he is a bit smug, and from what I heard when he was captain at the club, he couldn't wait to get out. So I'm not even sure whether he'd take the job, to be honest.
Great points by everybody who called in, and great points by the panel as well. Barry, you're going to get the... Definitely the call of the night, mate. You kept us going into extra time, mate. We've gone 15 minutes over time. So thanks for that, mate. But great show tonight, and you made some great points, Barry. And keep up the good work at the Nightingale as well, mate.
Thanks, guys. Fab show as always.
Take care, mate, tonight. And big thank you to you, Holly, Pete, and Chris. Get yourself onto Loaded tonight with Chris. And I'll be back tomorrow night with Holly for Ladies' Night. Have a good night, guys. Take care.
Take care, guys.
See you guys.
Critics attack. It feels like I've been talking to myself again, but it's the only